Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and in today's theory crafting video I'm going to take it a little bit slower because I'm going to be designing one of the most iconic units of Final Fantasy history. He will be exciting and he will be very dangerous. I'm resisting building a pure penetrative DPS as a character design, but I took some inspiration from recent turn of events in JP. And it's not just Bradley here. This isn't a recent turn of events in JP, but this is a potential partner for the character I'm designing today, and also a really inspiring unit for this design. But before I talk about why that is, I want to talk about the new Esper for JP, Chariot. Cool design here. Very cool looking Esper. And then on the Esper itself, we have a brand new effect, which I am basing this character around. You can tell it's a new effect because it still hasn't been translated into English for wotv yet. And that is AoE resistance penetration of 20. So AoE resistance penetration is a new mechanic. It's something I've seen coming for a long time, but it's something that I think they resisted implementing into the game until there were a bunch of other common, or at least common with new units, forms of defense, like wider area resist. This is becoming more and more common with units. Units can buff it now. So it's now become the newest way of dealing with something like this. So it's a good time to introduce a mechanic like this, now that there are other ways of dealing with this type of damage, even though they are, at the moment, more rare. But this creates the first design problem of the episode, and this goes back to King Bradley. So King Bradley was a really great penetrative DPS of his time, and at his time, there's been AoE and unit attack resistance since the beginning of the game, but it wasn't really being given super commonly to characters at this time. I mean, he was getting a little of it, it was starting here, and because it was building up, they felt safe to give a unit a lot of defense and weapon type penetrations, and a lot of DPS. And we see this here in Fuhrer's Wrath, and this became the buff that would really typify this type of unit. This would kind of become the standard. Now, with AoE resistance penetration, it's easy to imagine just adding this in. Maybe keeping the attack so that the damage is still high, but removing AP consumption. Or maybe keeping something like that, or something flavorful and specific to the unit, and removing the attack. Making them a little bit weaker in general, but more able to do damage to more units. Especially newer units that are more into AoE resistance. But there's definitely another way of going with this, and this is by replacing the slash attack resistance penetration, or the weapon type resistance penetration, which is what I'm going to try to do today. This creates another problem that our design will have to get around, and I think there's basically two ways of solving it. For the moment, Pierce is a good way to go, because there aren't a lot of people who actually build resistance to that anyways. So there's definitely a design space open for a really powerful defense and AoE resistance penetration spear unit. And people picked up on that in a poll that I did around this character, and we're going to be seeing some Pierce in their kit. But actually my idea was to make this a unit that doesn't attack with a specific weapon type, or can attack with basically all weapon types, or at least all of the physical ones. Because this isn't a magically based character, that doesn't necessarily make sense. And really, in my mind, there's only one character in Final Fantasy history that really fits this mold. There are multiple iterations of this character, of course, that I could choose from, but really, it's got to be Gilgamesh. So we do have a Gilgamesh coming. This is Frost Lord, Veritas of the Frost, and as you can see from his character design here, he's holding at least like 4 weapons at once, so he definitely fits the Gilgamesh design profile of being a weapons master. Specifically, this version of Gilgamesh is the only one that ever obtained the Excalibur, although not in this form. He would have to abandon his Veritas armor, joining Amnelis, getting a new armor from her, and then obtaining Excalibur, somewhere around that order of events. At this point, he would move more into swords, and that's the Gilgamesh we're more familiar with. But before that, he wasn't necessarily specialized in one thing and had a mastery of many types of weapons. The thing is, JP just released an Ice Gilgamesh, and this is potentially going to be a third Ice Gilgamesh. In each of these iterations, we can see Gilgamesh here brandishing multiple weapons. And while I admit that, seeing him here with a spear and a sword in most cases, missile might be a little bit of a stretch, he can definitely fight with his fists and is definitely wearing some pretty imposing armor to make for gloves. But I ultimately decided that I would have to go with Final Fantasy V's Gilgamesh. This one has also been previewed as an Earth unit as a part of the raids and the collaboration of Final Fantasy VII. This is a clear indication that they plan to implement him once they return to Final Fantasy V. Sorry, did I say 7 earlier? Force of habit. As we've seen this happen with Golbez, with Sephiroth, with Kain, I believe, with Kefka. So we know we're getting this unit as well, it's just a matter of when. And with AoE resistance penetration being the hot topic, it would be really timely and, hopping on the hype train to release a unit that can actually play with this Esper and build up higher AoE resistance penetration. So the sub-jobs that you ended up picking for him from this are High Dragoon, definitely, and I ended up going with Ranger, and we'll talk about why. In one way, it's to give him a really powerful combo. In another way, it's actually to hold him back a bit, I think, but also diversify him. And as inspiration, I took really prototypical units and copied out of their kit for the sub-jobs, using Gernsback and Liarte, of all people, as my inspirations for these two. So with all that being said, let's get into Gilgamesh. This is going to be a 100 cost Earth Warrior Sword unit, so we'll be able to use Blood Sword to restore HP. That does get complicated for him though, and we'll talk about it later. Move 3, jump 2. Typically we see him kind of holding a spear, so I would imagine that this guy is a little bit more inclined to be Dragoony. So I'm going to give him some extra jump. 7325 HP isn't particularly high. I want him to be kind of a no-guard unit, and that comes out specifically in his passives, but I want him to be very offensively powerful, but also a little bit more glass cannon-y. So you're not going to see a tremendous amount of defenses in his kit, and in fact, you're going to see ways that he might lower his defenses, but he has some pretty interesting other capabilities too that might keep him safe. 170 TP, 180 AP, 750 attack is a little bit restrained, and I think his kit warrants it, but it is fairly high. 160 magic, 70 agility is very fast, so that's going to help him in this whole glass cannon thing. Dexterity of 356 is relatively high, but he is pretty unlucky with only 235 luck, and this comes from the story element that he's always trying to get the Excalibur, and he's always being foiled by various Final Fantasy parties in his quest to do so. So, not very lucky. And this is going to mean that he doesn't have high potential for evasion, technically, like traditional evasion, and he also probably won't be super accurate either, even though he is getting some accuracy and some evasion to balance out his terrible luck. Pierce resistance of 10, missile resistance of 10, and slash resistance of 20 really, I think, recognizes that he is a weapons master. So, fists and magic, he doesn't really have any mastery in necessarily, so he doesn't have any good way of resisting them. 20 lightning resist, negative 10 wind, as we would expect. Resistance is 50% to frostbite, 50% to disable, 10 to stun. Master ability, we get the standard stuff for Earth allies. Reaction block rate of 25 is definitely unchanged. So I didn't... I think that's fair. Okay, no guard. 40% attack, all elemental resist down 10, reaction block rate of 30 base. So that's pretty cool. That goes to all out assault and adds AoE resistance penetration of 40. So we're getting part of the ideal combo here. I didn't put it all on one passive, just for maybe some flexibility. Search for the sword, defense penetration of 40. This is going to make the main combo for him. And then increases his counter chance by 20%. And this is going to be kind of nuts with some of his abilities, but we'll get there. High Dragoon lore gives him more defense penetration options as well as more attack. Also, focus, High Dragoon focus, 12% agility. He has very high base agility, so this will be good for him. Strike resistance of 15 would put that up to where he's resisting all of the physical damage types. Ranger lore, range 1 for self, not super helpful for him, and accuracy 25 for self, which could be good. He's not very lucky, so he's not very accurate, so you may just be filling a very deep hole with that 25 accuracy. And then focus, decrease skill activation time 150, not really helpful for his kit. And increase missile attack 12, which can be helpful, but missile isn't like his primary damage. He doesn't really have a primary damage type, I guess. Moving into counters. His custom counter is Bladed Aura. You can kind of imagine if he's carrying all these weapons on him, they're poking out from him like a fucking pincushion at all times. It's going to be pretty dangerous to get around this guy. 30% chance to counter all damage, moves up to 50% with Search for the Sword passive. Preemptive, 90% non-elemental pierce damage, healing power down for 3 turns to target. From High Dragoon, we get Preemptive Piercer, also 30 to 50% chance. This will do a bit more damage, although it will be earth elemental damage, and it will not inflict healing power down. And then finally from Ranger we have classic, meme-worthy Reflex. With his passive, this gives him a 35% chance to evade both physical and magical damage. While I definitely intend for Bladed Aura to be the most premium choice here, in a lot of ways, and definitely gave it good matchups into the meta, it's absolutely hilarious that he has a 35% chance to proc Reflex. There have been long controversies about certain characters maybe having a higher chance to proc Reflex. He would have it hard-coded into his kit, and I think that's meme-worthy. Now, this also means that I shouldn't make him too strong defensively, but in fact, I don't know. I'm not sure about the spirit. Let's change this to defense, actually. I definitely want to leave a wide open gap for magic units to still mess with this guy. Moving into the main kit, he has a weapons collector, so that's going to start him out with Stone Shuriken and Master of Arms. Stone Shuriken removes Protect and Shell, then does 121 earth missile damage, AP consumption up for 25% for targets and for self. So this has actually a fairly steep drawback, even though it does a lot for a basic attack. This is upgraded into Breaking Hail. Select up to 2 targets, so now you're at least getting AP consumption down on more than just yourself and one other. But also, it's going to reduce earth resistance by 20% before dealing damage. This is really going to open up the rest of his kit. This gives him an earth resistance break, which is, while it's not one that I think we're ever going to get super hard-coded in terms of like penetrations, especially when you can just use non-elemental damage. I think that this is another way of making his damage more consistent, potentially. But also, it is a single target skill for a unit that is primarily focused on AoE damage, so it's not necessarily, it's going to be more enabling than it is going to be outright powerful. The basic buff, Master of Arms, grants him haste and defense penetration 40 for 4 turns. So this is in keeping with a lot of buffs like this being 4 turns these days. 4 turns of haste and defense penetration is going to be very powerful for him. Flash of Insight gets upgraded into Weaponologist. This is going to bestow all attack type resistance 10 and a diamond AoE around self. And grant re-raise for self, which, like I said with his healing or use of Bloodsword, this can get complicated for him. We'll talk about that in a minute. Weaponologist adds an all-elemental resistance buff of 10% to all allies that are not self, and boosts his physical damage another 10%. So just really pouring on the damage here with his buffs one way or another. My ultimate combo reduces AoE resistance 60% for 3 turns to targets. It's a triangle AoE facing out from in front of him, 165% typeless earth damage. So even if you resist all of the physical damage types, he still has a typeless skill. Because, and this is like me thinking, okay, so why doesn't he just use all of the weapons at once? Resist that, bitches. Another early skill for him is going to be Heaven's Fall. It's a diamond AoE with decent range, 165 2-hit earth pierce damage, dispels haste and AP auto restore. And then finally his job level 25 skill, which doesn't get upgraded because his upgrades were spent elsewhere. Risky Blade Blitz. This is one of the 5-panel X shapes, kind of like cross destruction for Astrius. This is going to do 181 earth slash damage, and then will lower his own defense and spirit by 20 for 2 turns. So this is going to leave him open defensively to being taken out after this, which is why it's a risky Blade Blitz. But also, with risk comes reward, because if this KOs anyone, he will heal 20% HP on KO, although I say it so many times already, healing is going to be risky for him. Now, before I get into the sub-jobs, let me show you why with his LB. His LB is Excalibur. He often gets duped into getting this counterfeit copy of the Excalibur called the Excalibur, which is, I guess, powerful, but it's also kind of cursed. So this gives him a box AoE skill, guaranteed hit, so this allows him to do pretty solid damage to evasion units, even though he's not really going to be able to do anything else against them. Lowers all attack type resistances for targets 20%, so this is really going to open them up to the rest of his kit. And then it's going to do 200% non-elemental slash damage. So this is going to be another one that can't be tanked through elemental resistance of earth damage. And it's going to be lowering the slash resistance 20 before dealing damage, so they're going to be even more open to slash damage. But after dealing damage, it will inflict curse on him and lower his own reaction rate by 50% for 1 turn, which is basically, even if he had reflex at this point, it would basically reset reflex back to its normal power. So it's really going to reduce his ability to get extra damage in before damage comes in for him, or dodge it completely. And it's also going to turn off all of those healing effects in his kit, at least for 1 turn. Now, potentially, this could get him hit and see him not even able to use his re-raise, even though it's on him. Which I think is kind of funny, and it's just a really cool trade-off for a skill that he definitely needs in his kit. It's definitely very important for him to be able to do this damage, guaranteed hit style, but also lowering all attack resistances, it being non-elemental. This is just a really good skill for him, and it needs to come with a drawback that could seriously screw him over if it uses it at the wrong time. I can also see this being really interesting conundrum. I don't know how the AI is going to handle it, and that's going to make him a really fun character to see what the AI does with this and how it screws itself over. But I feel like this could be some 3D chess in manual as well. So you may have noticed that he doesn't have a strike type skill, at least not in his main job, and he's not going to get it from his sub jobs, but he will get it from his main sub. Don't Get Cocky will increase his reaction rate, or reaction block rate, by 40 for 3 turns. And then in a diamond area around himself with no friendly fire, he will deal 181% earth strike damage, inflicting AP down 25 on critical hits, and then giving CT up. So there's a couple parts of this that feel a little high for me, honestly, on rereading. Let's take this down to 20. Take this down to 200. Because I think that is pretty strong. I mean, there's definitely a good argument to be using this as his sub job, and it just adds more flavor to him, I think. And then we have Art of War, which is a box AoE around himself. It will grant Human Killer 10, Magic Attack Resistance 20 for allies, so finally a way of resisting magic for him. And CT up 200 for himself. Also, I need to make sure that he's not included in this. So one of them gives him CT, one of them gives everybody else CT, and they both do other things. For Dragoon, I thought it'd be really funny to give him Drain Jump. It's relatively low earth pierce damage, but it absorbs the damage done. This would be completely useless if he's cursed, which I think is funny. Just giving him a skill that doesn't work when after his on the turn after his LB is kind of funny. Spineworm's Blessing plus AoE grants the following effect for allies: negative 15 pierce resistance for 3 turns. So remember what I was saying about there isn't a lot of pierce resistance out there. Giving him pierce would be a way of getting around weapon type resistances. Well, even if they do have some pierce resistance, you and your allies can chip away at that. It also restores his AP by 20 and gives him an I think the unit resistance 25 is for self. Swift Drake Banner, increase move for 3 turns by 1, and increase agility, so Vitalize effect 25% for 3 turns. Stunning Lance, this is the first AoE skill we're going to get here. I don't really expect, a lot out of the single target skills from these sub-jobs. So really those are kind of duds here too, and there's going to be a lot of duds in Ranger. It's there to be a dud, except for maybe Barrage in a way, but not really, and Reflex essentially. But Stunning Lance is going to be a 6-panel rectangle in front of himself, so this is a pretty small AoE range, but technically larger than a cross shape, but also shorter range. Earth Pierce damage, 165 mod, and 25% chance to inflict stun for 1 turn. And then we have Dispel Spear. This is a plus AoE, gets decent range from himself, decreases AoE resistance 20, just this cast for targets. So I thought it was especially interesting that he got another way of reducing AoE resistance through this. And then that's going to be 165 Earth Pierce damage and a full Dispel. So that could be really useful for him technically. I can see High Dragoon potentially being used as a sub-job for him. And I think it's really good. And also, it fits the flavor of it. He kind of feels like a Spear main. Now, Spear has a lot of stuff, and in most indications of Gilgamesh, he is more of a sword person, and he is searching for the ultimate sword. I think that's really just a choice of depiction that's stuck for Final Fantasy V, as opposed to saying that he should be a Spear main. And he felt like Warrior of all the sword classes definitely needed the help more than Knight and more than Red Mage. But also making him an Earth Knight creates too strong a strategy between him, Ashenmont, and Bradley. It's just too much. He would already definitely get played on a team with those two, absolutely. But the synergies wouldn't be quite as strong. I need to break that up a little bit. So, Warrior. For Ranger, we have Sharpshoot, guaranteed hit, 165 Earth Missile damage, Vigilance, increase evasion rate 55, which is, again, putting for 1 turn. It's kind of like dumping sand in a deep hole of his no luck. Decrease all elemental resistances 17%, decrease all attack resistance 17%. This is a terrible buff for him. Absolutely horrible. Never run it with him. The evasion is for nothing, and he already has issues with elemental resistance, I think. Decreasing all of his attack type resistance, terrible. No upside. Mega Charge. Increase single target resistance 25. Decrease single target resistance 25 for 3 turns before dealing damage. 220 Earth Missile damage mod. This is the highest mod in his kit, and it will. I mean, we see it in raids and stuff. This definitely enables more single target damage. So this kind of gives him another alternate to dealing AoE damage. I think he's going to be good enough that this isn't necessarily ever going to be a big deal for him, but it's there. It could boost the damage of several of his least effective attacks, sure. Maybe this enables his partners more, though. Maybe this is... I don't know how well this stacks for Mont, but maybe it helps for him. I don't know. Again, this sub-job is not meant to be a banger. Earth... Poison Arrow, Earth Missile damage, 121 mod, very low mod, 25% chance to inflict poison, which is 15% damage for 3 turns. Shadowbind, reduce counter chance 100% before dealing damage, so this turns off counter chance for 3 turns. That actually could be kind of useful, technically speaking, but... And also it kind of... he's supposed to be able to counter you more often, because he has so many different ways of countering, so many different weapons. But also he's supposed to be able to stop you from countering because he has so many different ways to parry. So this fits really well for him flavor-wise. 121 Earth Missile damage mod, 25% chance to inflict Immobilize for 3 turns. And then finally we have a Barrage. This is the only diamond AoE or AoE skill in this whole sub-job. It is the... I mean, there's some technical stuff in here that's been interesting, but this is a really old sub-job. 165... Earth Missile damage mod on a diamond AoE isn't that great either. It does have more range on a lot of things in his kit though, so maybe. But that also probably just means that this is a way that he's going to waste his AP before he can actually do damage. I don't know. Seems bad, but really this character has so much potential to be really great, especially with a strong piercing sub-job, that basically the second sub-job was absolutely a gimme, and I wanted it to suck. With the exception of, again, the combination of Search for the Sword and Reflex. But at least I am forcing you to choose between doing that or 2 really strong counters. Both of these would be really powerful and, again, both based in Pierce. So very hard for people to resist as well. So with all that being said, this is my design for Final Fantasy V's Gilgamesh, and I hope that collaboration comes soon. I really think that, you know, maybe it's too soon to be going whole hog on AoE resistance penetration. Maybe this is something that should come out later, and I'm absolutely in favor of them taking a month to release like 6 brand new units into the non-limited pool so that, you know, pulling for everyone doesn't feel like it's, I don't know, a minefield where everything sucks and you barely get what you want. So I'm definitely in favor of waiting a while for releasing this character compared to others, and also that would give time for some of this just overwhelming power in his kit to maybe be matched a little bit better. I think that this design might be a little bit OP for modern wotv, but hey, we may get there in a couple of months once there's more ways to counter this. So, thank you very much for watching. Remember, the free-to-play option for YouTube is to like and subscribe, but if you have some money you'd like to give to the channel, check out the link in the description where, well, actually, you'll just find other places to like and subscribe. That's also free. But there are also ways to support the channel and to buy my books. I am a fiction writer, and I would really appreciate you doing that in a way. This channel is not just me exploring what I love, but giving me space to be able to remind you that I'm a fiction writer and that you should buy my books because I'm bad at promo, and this is basically it, baby. Help me out. So with all that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.